Okay, now what we're going to do is move on to our next vendor, which is StorageCraft, and they have a presentation coming up there. So that will be Michael Watson and Carl Thompson from StorageCraft, and the topic is there: Are you ready for ransomware? Are you ransomware ready? Completely different. No one's ready for ransomware. That's something we don't want. Are you ransomware ready? Safeguard your data with immutable storage. So with an organization being hit by ransomware every 11 seconds on average, it's not only important to fence your environment and detect, remove threats. Now more than ever, it is critical that you build a strategy on your ICT platform that delivers a recovery plan post removing the infection from your environment. Please remember that with ransomware and various threats out there, it's not a matter of if you get hit, but when you get hit. And we certainly see that across the board, very, very common. So what's your plan to get back to general service? BES and BES are a StorageCraft Elite partner, winning the best technology solution for 2020. And we're looking forward to what Carl and Michael have to present with us today. So over to you guys in StorageCraft. Thanks very much.
Matt, join us a bit soon. I actually think that we weren't due to start till 10:15, so I can apologise for Carl not showing up in the short term. But I guess just wanted to touch base again and thank BES for their support over the last 2 years and also the customers that we've gained over the last few years with our partnership. As Matt said, very much a strong partnership between BES and StorageCraft. So it goes back to about 10 or so years, but certainly in the last few years we've built some case studies together, and I remember back to the 2019 session where we actually sat on stage with Maddie Colker from Coral Homes, and that was a successful venture there where we did a bit of a panel session and spent the day together at the convention centre. And as things progressed, we worked forward with some customers with John and Amanda and even yourself, Matt. So I might, I guess, in the theme of immerse and integrate, it's not all a scare tactic today, and it's not all about just being ransomware ready, but actually thinking about how infrastructure, particularly what we're going to talk about today, how we can provide some business benefits to your organisations out there in the wild. So as we shift along, there we go. So as I said, Carl will be joining us as the session goes. He's just on a call till about 10:15. So I'll jump in and kick off as we are. So as I said, 2019 was the last time we all got together in person in terms of, you know, as a group with BESTech. So one of the things to think about is what's happened since 2019. So we were talking about immutable storage. We were talking about the OneSafe appliances back then. Very much the need was around file server consolidation and some efficient replication and a backup target. Certainly, Coral Homes, Toyota Tsusho, and also Genesis have experienced those gains in the last little while. In the probably last 18 months or so, ransomware has probably kicked off exponentially, and we knew it was kind of happening in the lead up to these sorts of things occurring, and I guess some of the needs in terms of organisations have changed in the last few years. In terms of, there was a big cloud debate on for the last few years. Matt, you're obviously accustomed to a lot of that happening over the last few years, be it private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, public cloud, right? And what services do we take care of? I think, you know, speaking on behalf of maybe the audience there, that there's been a fair settle on that, and indeed hybrid cloud would be the way of the future. Matt, can I get a thumbs up if you kind of agree on that, or disagree? Feel free to jump in.
Oh no, that's definitely the way I see it, and obviously it's a case-by-case scenario depending on the size of the business. But you know, we've definitely seen the advantages of hybrid cloud. You know, I think the smaller the business, it's probably more pure cloud, but you don't have to be that big to start thinking about hybrid cloud. So I think it's definitely the way of the future. Even with our really big customers, we've seen some transition to full cloud. So they've moved their whole workloads from on-premise They've had a strategy or a direction to basically go full cloud. And after they've done that for a little while, they've actually come back and realized they've dabbled, I suppose, in both spaces, and then they've come back and gone, hybrid cloud's actually the model that works best.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. I also want to obviously touch base on what you can see at the bottom of the screen there in terms of ArcServe plus StorageCraft and the new logo at the bottom for those of you who have dealt with us for quite a while. StorageCraft are now known as, we had a merge with ArcServe back in March earlier this year. So we're now StorageCraft and ArcServe companies. So, you know, from our side of things, that generates us and the capability that we've delivered for BES customers over the past few years. It just further expands that. So we've done some work on you know, virtual server environments and also cloud DR environments, and also some in more recent times some HCI deployments as well with Nutanix. So with ArcServe and StorageCraft together, what we kind of present to the market now, we're on the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a niche player, I believe it is. And we've actually promoted ourselves to now become from an industry player to be probably the 5th largest powerhouse in terms of data protection in the world. So that's actually quite exciting for us. Also enables us to expand on some alliance partnerships as well that we've got in place with also Sophos and Nutanix. So some exciting moments there, and I saw that Nutanix were on earlier today, which is kind of exciting for us. And we already share some deployments with our OneSafe platform and Nutanix as well. So looking forward to further extend on that story. Certainly for those in the crowd today, kind of means that we can expand anywhere from like a onesie twosie kind of PC environment all the way through to like a complex multi-cloud environment, and we've got the right data protection and recovery platforms to help you through with that as well. So, oh, I'm just going to go back one. What's happening here? Wow, slides are going well today. Okay, right. So what we're looking at here, guys, is obviously, I'm just going to build this slide out as we go so we don't get any more surprises. So from a StorageCraft and ArcServe perspective, we've got a strong focus on how we can recover your data and get you back quickly so that you're back into a level of service that that is both suitable for your customers and suitable for your internal organization. As you can see, this is obviously stats from Sophos Labs, and looking at effectively a lot of money that's going into the hands of criminals, right? So, you know, I think Matt touched on the stat before about every kind of 11 seconds. I think if you look up the Signals Directorate, they'll actually tell you the up-to-date statistics in terms of seconds of how, you know, organisations are being hit. Our goal here is to buck this trend, right? And effectively put some plans in place with yourselves that not only are an insurance strategy, but also deliver some business benefits on a day-to-day perspective. So, you know, this is obviously a very broad kind of macro slide without, you know, the personal side of things. Earlier this year, Matt, another sales leader at BES, and myself were able to attend a session of the independent schools of New South Wales. It was actually held on the Gold Coast, and we were able to sit in on a keynote that was delivered by Newcastle Grammar, and then also a Q&A session that was a couple of hours later. The keynote was actually was delivered from the principal of the school, and was around the impact of a ransomware attack on their school. You know, effectively, they were able to get the school back within, you know, and functioning. So they were hit on a Sunday night, for example, but they were able to get the school back up and running to a service level back on the Tuesday. Unfortunately, when they got hit on the Monday night, the Sunday night, sorry, they had to turn the kids around at the gate on the Monday morning. They had to think about their whole strategy from a communications perspective out, because everything was internal on-prem. And Michael Browning and the team there did probably a great job in terms of the recovery aspect there. Now, Obviously, we're looking at a ransomware payout slide here at this point in time. But I just wanted to be mentioned that these guys at Newcastle Grammar actually had cyber insurance as well. So they went through a process where they had prepared themselves very well for an attack and an incident of this nature. And to be fair, they worked with a lot of vendors, including TAS. There might be some schools out there in the crowd at the moment that are currently using that application, and they work closely with some of their existing vendors. But the personal toll and the story that these guys kind of shared with a group that was around the Q&A was particularly interesting. So just some highlights that I just wanted to bring into the story today before Carl gets in and delivers his session and the rest of the strategy that we're talking about, right? So again, these guys had cybersecurity insurance, so they had insurance already there to go. These guys had a really robust backup strategy. They were backing up locally to disk, they were backing up to tape as well, and they were also using the same application. They were using Veeam actually to back up to the cloud as well, to AWS storage. So storage backups in 3 locations and an offline copy as well. Unfortunately, one of the things, this came out of the Q&A session that was shared. There was a particular bug that was around at the time, which made it quite difficult to get the mappings of their of the file services backups from the cloud back to Earth. So some of the challenges there was they had to actually go back to tape to be able to recover that data. Now, in particular, that story there probably took a few days. The school was back and functioning on the Tuesday, but needless to say, there was a fair bit of effort that needed to be done over the next few weeks and months to properly recover from that sort of outage. So I think some stats that I took from that day in notes was there was only about 4 or 5 terabytes of data that needed to be restored from tape in terms of their file services, and that, yeah, again, took about 4 to 5 days to get that back. But again, there was a number of incident chasing and things like that the guys had to go through from a team perspective, particularly exhausting on the entire group. And if you are in the education kind of sphere, I'd recommend you kind of try and follow up that case. The other highlights that they found, and an interesting note, was they actually found some stuff in their environment and files that actually said die, Sophos die. So these guys, again, had the right practice in terms of Intercept X and were deploying proactive measures to ensure that they stopped any infection from getting into their environment, any threat. But unfortunately, they were breached. And due to the forensics and the cyber insurance process, I think it remains slightly unclear as to how they were actually breached. But as a result, they've obviously now strengthened their entire posture across their sphere and their environment. So I guess as we progress forward, I just wanted to share that little story to focus on some of the relevance as we move forward into a ransomware prevention strategy, right? So obviously our piece here is around the backup and recovery piece, and how we can do some things around that, and we'll particularly focus on the immutable storage side of things, and the strategy of copies that we have around from a storage perspective there. So look, there are no silver bullets. It's a shifting landscape, as we know, and we've always got to be monitoring how we can evolve and ensure that we're delivering kind of more improved outcomes for our environments, right? So standard sort of thing. This isn't our area of expertise, obviously, but certainly necessary when considering a ransomware prevention strategy for your environment. This is a little bit more of our focus here in the yellow, where we're focusing on immutable storage. We're focusing on the copies of data that you should have. Immutable storage has obviously jumped in to be key to that strategy. We'll focus on how we can enable that, or how we can use that to be an enabling strategy for your organisation as well. And also, as we continue, and I'll touch back on that Newcastle Grammar story, what was delivered to the crowd there was that as part of the process, there's obviously the human side of things, MFA, big thing, we all know about that. but the disaster recovery exercises, right? So there was a low reliance on tape in that organisation, in that school, up until the disaster. But immediately after that happened, the focus then quickly went back to what resources they had and what the guys could use in their environment with their existing budget and infrastructure available to them. And as such, tape became a big part of their testing strategy ongoing, right? So we're talking weekly restores from tape, monthly restores from tape, as well as the arduous process of managing tape ongoing inside that environment. So I guess one thing that was definitely missing in that story was immutable storage. Now, having some discussion with Michael Brown in the past over email, and certainly in the show when I did meet him there, he did suggest that the immutable storage would have helped significantly in terms of some of their restore efforts as well. So there are some other business enhancements that we're able to deliver as part of this strategy with the scale out storage framework that we have with the OneSafe immutable storage platform. But effectively, one of the things that I drew from sitting down in that session was kind of like, what do you want? Do you want ransomware in your environment? Do you want tape, or do you want immutable storage? Right, was kind of what I drew out of that whole platform. Nobody wants ransomware. Where possible, you try and avoid the use of tape, and the need for immutable storage has kind of crept up massively in the past few months with the rise of ransomware. So certainly we're seeing it from a preventative measure and a lockbox measure, just to complement any existing data protection strategy that's in there. But certainly with the likes of Toyota Tsusho, with Coral Homes, or a case study with the team at BES, certainly Wyndham as well, is we're seeing the platform of immutable storage and the OneSafe platform being used to enhance, I guess, business environments, and actually be used to consolidate file services and deal with another problem, which is the unstructured data growth, which can obviously hamper the growth and the management of any HCI infrastructure as well. So here is some things in terms of what you can do, obviously, with our ransomware prevention strategy. And certainly I touched on the alliance that we have with Sophos and also Nutanix, being the combined ArcServe and StorageCraft now. So that's talking about the detection and the prevention piece. Then obviously thinking about how we respond to a disaster and obviously removing the threats. But more importantly, and the focus of today's session is going to be on how we recover when impacted, right? And that's where we kind of come into our own with this platform of OneSafe here. Right, is let's put it on the floor and let's make sure that we've got a safeguard around everything, not necessarily just to be there, but it's not a matter of if you get hit, it's when you get hit. Here is how we're going to recover, and having that infrastructure on premise for various reasons as well. So with that, I'll probably pass over to Carl now and sit myself on mute. Any questions as we go, guys? Please put them through, and we'll get to that probably throughout the call and towards the end. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Michael. That's great. Can you, what we'll do is we'll just switch screens. I think you need to stop sharing, and then I will be able to grab it from there. Cool, thank you. And I will go over to screen one. Here we go. Cool. So look, Michael's talked a lot about the ransomware strategy and where we fit in. The other challenge that really gets incorporated into this is around the data growth. And as per this graph that I've got here from IBM, it just shows how the structured data, so in terms of your databases and your virtual environment, the structured data is not really the growing problem. It's this unstructured data, and it contains a lot of stuff, images, videos, design, your secondary storage, your backups. This growth is a challenge because we've got to store it, but we also got to protect it. And when ransomware gets in there and starts infecting this type of data, it's, you know, that suddenly the need to back up frequently throughout the day to meet your recovery point objectives and to minimize that data loss, but then the time to actually restore this back is starting to become the big problem that a lot of customers and our partners are coming to us to help solve that challenge. So it's not only the ransomware, it's the combined data growth, and a lot of it is you know, just the way the industry is changing. And, you know, an example for me is that I just don't delete anything. So I just have stuff that just keeps collecting. You know, I've got a drone, I fly around, there's videos, but, you know, this goes right the way through. We've got a number of councils and they've got, you know, underground imaging, and they've got, you know, recordings and drone footage and all sorts of things. That's important, high value data that if ransomware was to go and infect it, and it's probably sitting on some sort of NAS that's not really been protected, it's a huge cost to them to get that back. And so when we look at that and think about the challenges Michael's talked about, we have a really great solution to directly address this at the root. And this is our OneSafe scale out NAS storage. We present this object-based storage as a simple, easy to use NAS. You get a lot of enterprise features like inline dedupe, real-time replication, the snapshotting we're going to talk a bit about today, the encryption, and really we've simplified it into a nice, easy cloud-based management. And the key thing here is addressing a lot of these problems at the source. And when we talk about, you know, protecting this data and the disaster recovery that we have, it's about having an always-on continuous protection that gives us immutable storage with a time-based retention policy to give you versioning, real-time replication to securely get this data into another location in case of a more catastrophic natural disaster, but the ability to instantly recover this data. So whether it's your backup set that's been hit, I mean, the ransomware is going to go after your backups first, right? We need to quickly, instantly get potentially hundreds of terabytes of data back right away to get that restore back into my environment, or even your primary storage. So the use cases where we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of success is, as Michael's talked about, the ransomware protection. It's immutable storage that we have. It's great to get a copy of your backups onto it as a target, you know, or a primary backup target directly if you don't have existing storage or you're needing to look for something that can actually scale out and address your requirements, but also the combined use case of unstructured storage. So when you look at that graph that I had at the start there, the big blue, the growing unstructured data, what we can do is take that problem and that challenge off your primary expensive SAN storage, put it directly onto a OneSafe or a cluster, and we can scale that out. You don't need to worry about what kind of growth you're going to go through in the next 3 to 5 years. We can keep adding disks or adding storage to grow that single pool of storage. Extremely easy, out of the box, it will just continue to scale out. And that same pool of storage can be used as a backup target as well for the existing structured data that you do have. And what we're achieving there is we're getting rid of the problem of saying, look, our 10 terabytes or 100 terabytes of file serving data has been infected. The OneSafe can instantly recover that. We don't have to go and get the backup software and restore it all the way back into production and have that downtime associated with it. So it's really addressing that at the root by putting the data directly on storage that can address that need. So, looking at it at a high level, you've got your data, whether it's backup data or file sharing coming into the NAS. The storage does immutable snapshots every 90 seconds. So using object storage, we effectively look at the objects and they become persistent and immutable every 90 seconds. And the ransomware can't touch those snapshots. If there was an infection, we can instantly promote a snapshot share directly back in for immediate production use, whether that again is users working from Active Directory integrated shares on the OneSafe, or it's a backup target that we need to get a clean backup set back. So how do we deal with this? How does the OneSafe actually do this instant recovery, and how do we offer immutable storage? So the key thing is we've got this object store that's really the brains of the operation, and that's really hidden behind what we call microservices, where we run our file system. So you've got a typical NAS, SMB, NFS file shares available. And these are content addressable objects that are created from the file system, and they're all decomposed, inline, deduplicated, and compressed into that storage. These objects are persisted and immutable to the distributed object store. So basically, if we think about it, what we're doing is as data comes in, it gets written once as an object and never overwritten. We don't overwrite anything. So any changes that happen are new objects that came in. If there's ransomware that goes and infects data, the original objects are not touched. They're immutable on the object store. And then effectively you have the snapshot retention, which is how long do we want to retain these changes for? So something like a backup set, you might have a 1 year or 7 year retention perhaps within your backup environment. On the OneSafe, you might just have, say, a 2-week retention to protect that set of data in the immediate, event of a ransomware threat. So this is really the technology that we're bringing in. And compared to traditional NAS or SAN storage, it's block store, typically based on RAID, we overcome a lot of other challenges. We automate 95% of typical storage admin tasks by putting this together and presenting it as a file system. Things like a failed disk can instantly rebalance in a 20th of the time compared to RAID, so it can self-heal. And we get around a lot of the problems of carving up LUNs and storage and allocating storage to certain things. And we can treat this as a single pool of scale out storage, which is really cool. So looking at a basic level, right, we've got a gray line here. This represents a backup image or a file that gets saved into the OneSafe cluster. As it comes in, before it hits the disk, we divide it up into objects. They get compressed, and then they get deduplicated, and then they get distributed. So what we do to protect against disk failure or drive failure is we distribute 3 copies of all objects. So effectively, all of this is happening in line. The other thing with object storage is that there's no rehydration. So when we need to get data out, so if your backup software needs to drive a restore back to your environment, there's no rehydration impact either. So it comes out at the same speed, which is really critical. So looking at this, what happens if the drive fails? Well, because there's now at least 2 other copies across all the other disks, it can simply self-heal. It just rebalances. And because it doesn't have to read every sector on every disk like RAID, it can rebalance and get them from various different disks to very quickly, transparently rebuild itself without having to actually go in and replace that disk. Obviously, we replace the disk, it's more storage, it'll just do a rebalance that doesn't have any impact to users while operations continue to take advantage of that space. And then, as I said, we can scale out. In year 2, we might decide, oh, we've got a new project coming up, or we're getting close to the storage capacity. We can simply plug in additional nodes. And you can actually go from 1 to 2 to 3. You don't have to go from 1 to 3 like this, as is common in other solutions. But basically, we can just keep adding storage with a single namespace, a single share that allows that pool of storage to keep growing. And obviously we can have different file shares, a backup share that's all accessing the single pool of storage. So in terms of the different models, there's a couple of different models here. They're actually all based on Dell hardware. So we've got 4-hour next business day on-site support from Dell globally with this. But effectively the 4412 holds 12 maximum of 12 times 12 terabyte disks. The 4417 can take an extra couple of disks, up to 17 disks, to effectively give us 204 terabytes of raw capacity. They support SAS or SATA, the hot swap power supplies. There's dual, and as I mentioned, the support, and we also have options around base tier and SFP+. We also have an all-flash 5410 model. This takes 10 SSDs and effectively gives you, high-performance storage based on object storage, for certain requirements there. But looking at our capacity model, the 4400 series, the 4412's got 12 disks in the front. The 4417 can take an extra 3 in the middle and 2 more at the back. We've got a bunch of 10 gigabit Ethernet, redundant power supplies, and lights out management on the unit as well. The other key thing that I did touch on towards the start was the multi-site replication. So what we do for disaster recovery is we can do an asynchronous replication to remote sites. You could have 2 production sites, for example, Brisbane and Sydney. They each have primary shares that local users are working on, and we replicate copies of those shares to the other site. So this replication is very efficient on your WAN. It's all post-dedupe. Post-compression replication. It's looking at the remote site to see what objects are already there and really just getting the minimum, most efficient amount of data across there is required to keep that copy of the share, as well as the snapshots, protected against a disaster. So, it's a great solution that offers a lot of benefits, to address a lot of these challenges. And yeah, the key thing, as I kind of touched on, is the installation and the ease of use. It's a very quick process to get up and running. The default is a cloud-based management. You obviously have the option to deploy your own private instance of this web-based management, but it gives us a secure storage management that's, again, cloud or local based. And as I mentioned, 95% of typical tasks don't require typical storage administration. So very, very easy to deploy. And just to sort of touch again on the use cases for the capacity storage, as I mentioned, the file server consolidation, getting those large file servers off your SAN, off your primary storage onto a purpose-built file server that's designed for immutable storage. Users can right-click on files and folders, previous versions, and grab their stuff back. So that reduces administration effort in backup and recovery. And from an admin level, we can instantly recover an entire share from a snapshot. Also great for data archival and disk-based backup targets. So a lot of our customers are finding, multiple use cases to leverage the single pool of storage, getting a lot of efficiency out of it from that as well. So look, our website has a lot of use cases and case studies. You're welcome to go and look about how our customers are safeguarding their businesses against rapid data growth and protecting them from the threats of ransomware and offering, the full cybersecurity. But yeah, that really brings me to the end of a presentation here today. We've got a little bit of time, I think, for some Q&A. If anyone's got any questions, I think we have to use the chat function there to put in any questions. Michael, do you have any closing comments here?
No, nothing to add. I think you covered it all pretty well. I think the intent for today is to get through kind of a snappy presentation and give a view in terms of where we're at, where we see the threats and some problems that we can solve. If you can, Carl, maybe just expand a little bit on the replication advantages of the OneSafe. I know Toyota Tsusho South Pacific certainly replicating between Brisbane, Fiji, and I think PNG was the other site. Certainly leverage the advantage of the push-pull benefits of and looking at the target first before replicating as advantageous. Maybe you want to touch on that a little bit. Veeam's the backup application there, and we're doing some file replication too. So maybe touch on that in the lack or the absence of any other questions. And
yeah, cool.
I think it'll be time to.
Yeah, look, I think I touched on a little bit with the replication, but yeah, what it does is using object storage and the metadata associated with that, it is able to basically it has an index of the data that it needs to replicate, particularly that initial seed. It's going to have to send the bulk of the data across. It can send that index over to the remote site, and that can respond back going, cool, well, I've already got a lot of this information, and it will send a request saying, cool, this is the objects that I need, and it has a lot of efficiency around that. So particularly where you've got multiple locations with their own unstructured data and file shares, we can leverage the dedupe and compression and the existing objects that are each site to give that extra level of efficiency around the replication, which is really cool. Yeah. I just see a question there from Dan, the minimum time intervals. It generally happens, it's instantaneous. It generally sits around the timing with the 90-second snapshot. So a lot of the timing is when the objects get persisted, and obviously everything only gets written once, but as the snapshots run, that becomes your next mutable set. and that's generally the replication to some degree is tied to that. But yeah, you're effectively getting continuous replication. We can instantly promote. So effectively, you've got your primary share, and as you said, they're asynchronous. The other share is available, it's accessible, it's read-only. We can instantly promote that share, and users can begin work immediately off that share. And the cool thing is as well, is if we want to revert back, let's say that the original site had gone down, as it comes back up, it automatically resumes the replication to catch it up and continue that process. And at any time, obviously, you can then go and revert back. So that becomes
So really efficient to fail back, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
To get back to normal. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Nothing more from me. Thank you, everybody, for listening for the time that we've had from my side of things, and looking forward.
Yeah, cool.
To
thanks, Bez.
Okay, thanks very much, Carl and Michael. I'll just add a little bit there quickly as well, I suppose. So I've been in the IT industry for a long time now, way too long. And look, you know, we've seen storage, we've seen backup. It used to be a complex thing. Large organizations have the luxury of hiring people in dedicated roles. So, you know, if you're large enough to be able to have a storage engineer on board, you know, the organization can just sort of pass that problem and that, I suppose, level of confidence over to this one person in the organization who's responsible for managing Veeam backups and working out the on-premise, how many terabytes, you know, time to recover, you know, recovery point objectives, all of these other things that live in that backup and sort of a world. But if you're an organization that doesn't have that luxury of having someone who's basically dedicated and responsible for this, it's such an important component of any business that you really need to make sure that you're confident. The example of the school that came and made the presentation is a great one, where they have their own storage person, an expert who specializes in backups. And even then, it still took them a few days to recover that. But that's actually a pretty good recovery, if you ask me. I've seen many people who live in this world of, they think they're covered, they think everything's backed up, they think they've got the ability to recover in a short period of time, and it's not until they get hit with some form of critical disaster, whether it be fire or theft or ransomware, that all of a sudden they haven't tested their processes, they haven't tested their recovery points. That makes it all very, very difficult. So for me, if you don't have that dedicated person of responsibility in your organization who can live and breathe this stuff and be an absolute expert at it, then turn to people who are experts. So turn to StorageCraft. As you can see from the presentation, they've got a solution for pretty much everything in their space, whether it's on-prem or cloud or hybrid, and come through people like BES as partners of StorageCraft. So we use this ourselves. We use StorageCraft ourselves, and the product is just fantastic, and it just continues to evolve, continues to get better all the time. So for Bez, a lot of the people in the attendee list today, really, I don't think there's anyone that I know of that probably have that absolute dedicated person as a storage engineer or storage expert. So this is a particular session that will be applicable to every business, whether you're small, medium, large. Take the opportunity to think about and review your backup strategies, and more importantly, your recovery strategies. And make sure that as a business, you're really confident that you know where you stand, and test them. And if you've got any issues, reach out and we'll take it from there. Thanks very much, Carl and Michael, for your time today.